Hello. For most of your articles, um, maybe not the opinion pieces, but most of your articles, you're going to need to gather information from sources. Sometimes those sources will be an article from Psychology Today magazine or something like that. But often those sources are interviewing experts. The expert could be simply someone who played in the football game. Okay, that qualifies. It could be a professor from Hope who's an expert on climate. It depends on the topic. And that step of gathering information can cause students some anxiety. It's one of the components of the class that makes it really valuable, but also it can make it a little bit stressful because that's a little different, something that you haven't had to do very much. Uh, I think of a student I had many years ago who was, um, gosh, had to be one of the most introverted, shyest students that I had ever had, um, and she struggled with that for sure, and predictably, she would go with other editors and other reporters to conduct her interviews when she was first starting. Uh, but by the end of her work in journalism, and I think she took it for 2 or 3 semesters, she wrote one of the best articles we produced. It was on a swimmer with some physical disabilities. Uh, and she interviewed the swimmer, she interviewed the swimmer's parents, she interviewed um, some of the people who worked with the swimmer in other classes, including the star football player and people that she would have been so hesitant to speak with in the past. She worked with them because she gained that confidence about how to talk with people, even people that she didn't know very well. I've got a document linked, and let me see if I can. There, I have a document linked. I'm going to look through that with you just to kind of step you through some of the things I need you to be able to do when you conduct interviews. Uh, the first thing says always have your questions written down before the interview, but I don't, it's not a good approach if you conduct an interview simply by asking a question, waiting for an answer, asking a question, waiting for an answer. A good interview is a conversation. And a lot of times, a good interview starts with just a big, broad question like, um, what was the scariest moment of this experience? From there, you can gather a ton of good information. But it is valuable to have questions written down so that if there are some pieces of the story that you know you're going to need, you don't forget to ask about them. But don't approach an interview with the idea that you'll ask a question, they'll give an answer. You'll ask a question, they'll give an answer. You really want to turn it into a conversation. Always complete thorough research on the topic prior to the interview. It's kind of rude to go talk with an expert and ask them some question like you go to the principal and you say, "Okay, explain to me the tardy policy." That would be rude. Your job is to make sure you thoroughly understand the tardy policy and ask questions based on your thorough understanding. Some of the things are tough. Look an interviewee in the eye, speak formally and confidently. Those are some challenges that you'll become better at. Please make sure always you let the person being interviewed know very clearly that this is an interview for an article that will be published in the West Ottawa. I think you should always just record your interviews. If you're handwriting interviews, you got to make sure you get the quotes right. But if you record them, then it's real easy to get the quotes right. You just listen to them again and confirm that you have it down correctly. Um, it's real important to save your recorded or written interview notes. We have had instances in the past where someone has said, "Hey, that's not what I said." And as the teacher, I've gone to the reporter and I said, "So and so said this isn't accurate." And the reporter said, "Just a minute," hit the recording and said, "Right here, that's what the person said." Then we're fine. We're accurate. But saving those notes makes sure that we can prove we're accurate. Always try to interview students uh, uh, in the building outside of class time. but if we have to, we can interview students during class time. Um, Obviously, always treat your interviewee with respect, but be honest. So if you're interviewing someone and your point is that you disagree with a policy, don't pretend you agree with the policy. I think it's just fine to say, hey, I'm writing a piece and it argues against this, but I wanted your perspective. So we're not going to be dishonest in that, but we're also not going to we can ask tough questions, but we're not going to be in an attack mode. Try not to include an interview while you still have questions or where there's something you don't quite understand. At the end of an interview, always say thanks. And I think it's a good idea always at the end of an interview to uh, ask if it's okay if you reconnect. Because if you don't ask if it's okay if you can reconnect, it can feel a little awkward reconnecting. Oh, I got a couple more questions. But if you've said, hey, I might have to get back to you just if something else comes up or if there's something I forgot to ask, is that cool? And they say, yep, then it feels really comfortable. Maybe the biggest thing, don't procrastinate in scheduling and completing your interviews. I say in class again and again, yesterday is a better point to have this done than tomorrow. Because if there's anything that consistently causes reporters to perform less well, it's procrastination. Get it done. You got to go get it done. Make the phone call. Just get it done. A lot of you are uncomfortable making phone calls. You're going to be all right. It's not going to hurt you. So get it done. On this, at the bottom of this document, I have just a couple of the classes in the past. I asked them at the end of the year, hey, tell future students one thing you've learned about interviewing. So there's a bunch of comments from past students about what they've learned from interviewing beyond likely what I included in this information today. Your assignment is going to be to interview someone. You can interview a friend, a relative, aunt, uncle, but ideally someone who has some experience that will lead to some interesting stories. And I think maybe of all of the things I can tell you about interviewing, it's get stories. If someone says, I was really surprised by that, then say, well, tell me about it. Tell me about the moment you found out. How'd you react? Where were you? Get stories. And that's the focus of this assignment. I want you to find 3 interesting things about the person you interview, but then I want you to have a good story to show the reality, the truth of whatever interesting component you learned about the person. That's all for now.